This lesson is on multiplying integers. You've added and subtracted integers, and now we're going to bring in multiplication. To multiply integers, we're going to use the rules below, and we can also use the rules below to simplify expressions. So the product of two positive integers is positive. So I actually like to use, and you should be filling in that word, I like to use this. It's the triangle. And on that triangle, I have a positive and two negatives. So if I have the product of two positive integers, nothing really changes. That just becomes positive. That is the multiplication you've been doing since you first learned multiplication. But when it happens, what changes is when I have the product of two negative integers, the answer is also positive. And what can happen here is I can cover up what I have. So I have two negatives. And what am I left with? Positive. So that helps me remember what the sign is going to be. When I have the product of a positive integer and a negative integer, the answer will be negative. So if I cover up my symbol here, I have a positive integer and I have a negative integer. So what am I left with? A negative integer. So that just helps me remember and decide what the sign of my answer will be. So we're going to use that symbol for each of these problems. So 7 times 12, that is a positive times a positive, and that's just what we've been doing since we learned multiplication. And if you have to use your calculator to do that multiplication, that's okay. So 7 times 12 is 84, and I know that it will be positive because I have two positive integers, but I don't need to write that positive in my final answer, because when I don't see a symbol, I know that it's going to be positive. So, for my triangle again. Here I have a negative integer and a negative integer. So in my triangle, I'm going to cover up the two things that I have. I have two negatives, so my answer will be a positive. And 5 times 9 is 45. But again, because it's positive, I don't need to write that in my final answer. So my final answer is just 45. I'm drawing my triangle again. This time I have a negative and a positive. So on my triangle, I'll cover those up. It's a negative and a positive. So I'm left with a negative, and 4 times 8 is 32. So my final answer is a negative 32. So evaluate, we just did some of those. Remember that that just means we're going to plug in values for the variable. Okay. So I have negative 3, A, B. And remember that when I don't see a symbol, an operation, and my operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication. Let's start using the dot for multiplication. Or we can use the parentheses for multiplication. And then our last one is division. Right? So I have negative 3 times a value for A and times a value for B, because in between here is multiplication. So I have to have a symbol in there. Another way we can write it is negative 3 times a value for A and times a value for B. Oops, I'm not going to write that B in there. Times a value for B. So inside there will be A and inside there will be B. So what I have for A is 3, and what I have for B is negative 5. If I use parentheses, it'll look like this. The value for A is 3, the value for B is negative 5. And now I can just do multiplication using order of operations. Multiplication can be done in any order, but I'll just work from left to right. So I have negative 3 times 3. Because that's a negative and a positive, if I use my triangle, I have a negative and a positive, so I'm going to be left with a negative. So I know it's going to be a negative, and 3 times 3 is 9. And then I'm going to bring down everything I haven't used yet, so times negative 5, because I haven't used those things. I have to remember to bring that symbol down too. Negative 5, or negative 9 times negative 5. If I use my triangle, I have a negative and a negative, so I'll be left with a positive. And 9 times 5 is 45. So my final answer is a positive 45. And then we can also simplify, and that just means that we're going to multiply things we can together. And really what this is saying is if you have a negative 12, parentheses 4x, what this really is a negative 12 times 4 times x, because I don't see any symbols in there. So when I have parentheses and I don't have anything between, I know it's multiplication. And when I have a number and then a variable with nothing in between, I know that it's multiplication. So both of those things in there are multiplication. Okay. So negative 12 times a positive 4. So if I use my triangle, I have a negative and I have a positive, so my answer will be negative.
There you are.
And 12 times 4 is 48. Bring down everything you haven't used yet. So I have a multiplication symbol, and I have an X. And then I can multiply those things together. Now, if this was addition, we wouldn't be able to combine those terms, but because it's multiplication, we can. So, and when we have a multiplication of a number and a variable, we don't have to write that multiplication symbol. So we can write negative 48 times X. And because it's a number and a variable, we don't have to use that symbol. So this is our final answer.